The royal box at Wimbledon is reserved for royalty, legends, and some of the most powerful people on earth. So when Sir David Beckham leaned forward in his seat, clapped his hands, and whispered something to the person sitting next to him, nobody thought much of it at first, until the cameras caught his lips moving, and the world realized he was talking about her. The 21-year-old Filipino sensation had just walked onto center court as the first seeded player from her country in Grand Slam history. 25,000 fans had crossed oceans to watch her play. The entire Philippines was watching with them. And in that moment, one of the most famous athletes on the planet did something nobody expected. He stood up. And he applauded. But here's the twist. Beckham wasn't just being polite. He was watching her with the eye of someone who understands, from the deepest, most personal place imaginable, exactly what it takes to carry the weight of a nation. And when he finally spoke about her after the match, his words left the tennis world completely stunned. Chapter 1. The Royal Box at Wimbledon is the most exclusive seating in all of sport. Reserved for royalty, heads of state, and the most celebrated figures in British society, sitting there is to be acknowledged as someone who has shaped the world in some meaningful way. It is history recognizing history. And on July 1st, 2026, one of those seats was occupied by Sir David Beckham. The former England football captain had been knighted just days earlier, adding Sir to a name already synonymous with global fame. He had attended Wimbledon for years, a familiar face in the royal box, a man who looked completely at home among icons. But this year felt different. The attention wasn't only on the tennis. It was on a 21-year-old from the Philippines who had captured the imagination of the entire world. Alex Eala had just made history as the first Filipino in the Open era to earn a seated position at a Grand Slam. 25,000 Filipino fans had flown to London to witness it, turning center court into something electric and completely unprecedented. The All England club was bracing for a moment unlike anything it had ever experienced. In the royal box, Sir David Beckham watched closely. A man who had shared pitches with legends, faced pressure at the very highest level, built a career defined by excellence under the most unforgiving spotlight on earth. He knew what greatness looked like from the inside. So when Alex stepped onto center court, it wasn't just her presence that made him lean forward in his seat. It was something subtler, something deeper, something that would leave the tennis world stunned when he finally chose to speak. Chapter 2. The noise. It wasn't the tennis that caught his attention first. It was the noise. A sound unlike anything Wimbledon had ever experienced. A roar that didn't just come from the stands, but from a sea of Philippine flags waving in complete unison. From thousands of voices chanting a single name. All at once. All together. Beckham leaned forward in his seat. He had seen passionate fans before. He had played in stadiums that shook with the weight of a nation's hopes. He knew what it felt like to walk out onto a pitch and feel millions of people willing you forward with everything they had. But this was something else entirely. And then he saw her, a young woman in white, moving across the grass with a grace that completely belied her 21 years. A left-handed player with a powerful forehand and a tenacity that seemed almost impossible to break. Someone who had just become the first Filipino in history to earn a seated position at a Grand Slam, and who had brought 25,000 fans across oceans just to watch her play. But it wasn't just her game that made Beckham stop. It was the way she carried herself. The way she never looked overwhelmed by the moment. The way she seemed to absorb the pressure of an entire stadium. All of it, every flag, every chant, every expectation, and turn it into something focused, controlled, and unshakably calm. Between points, she acknowledged the crowd. But she never let the pressure show on her face. Not once. Not even for a moment. Beckham noticed it immediately. Because he had seen that look before. Because he had worn it himself. For 2 decades, he had carried the weight of England on his shoulders. He knew what it meant to be the face of a country on the world stage. To feel the loneliness of the spotlight. To live under the burden of becoming a symbol for millions of people who would never fully understand the game, but who needed you to win it for them anyway. And in Alex, he saw something familiar. A kindred spirit. Someone shaped by expectation and pressure at the very highest level. He leaned toward the person beside him. "She's special," he whispered, his eyes still fixed on center court. "That girl is special." The cameras caught his lips moving. Within minutes, the internet was buzzing with confusion and curiosity. What had Sir David Beckham just said about Alex Eala? The question spread across social media as clips circulated frame by frame. Nobody had a clear answer yet, but the speculation grew louder by the second, and the sense that something significant had just happened was impossible to shake. Chapter 3. The interview after the match. As the roar of center court faded into a distant hum, Beckham was approached by a BBC reporter. The question was simple, almost routine. "Sir David, you've been watching Wimbledon for years. What did you think of today's action?" Most celebrities would have offered a polite, rehearsed response. A comment about the tournament, the atmosphere, the tradition of the place. Perhaps a mention of strawberries and cream. Beckham didn't do that. He paused, still carrying the weight of what he had just witnessed. And then he spoke. "I came here to watch someone special," he said, his voice carrying the quiet certainty of someone who had spent 2 decades under the brightest lights in sport. "And I wasn't disappointed." The reporter leaned in. "Are you talking about Alex?" Beckham smiled, a knowing expression that suggested he had been waiting for exactly that question. "She's the real deal," he said. "I've seen a lot of young players come through. I've seen talent. I've seen hype. I've seen people who couldn't handle the pressure. But she's different." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You can see it in the way she carries herself, the way she acknowledges the crowd, the way she never lets the pressure show on her face. That's not something you can teach. That's something you're born with." The tennis world went quiet. A global icon, a man knighted just days earlier, whose name carried weight far beyond any single sport, was publicly praising a 21-year-old from the Philippines, standing in front of a camera at Wimbledon and telling the world she was the real deal. But he wasn't finished. "I know what it's like to carry the weight of a nation," he continued, his voice quieter now, more reflective. "I know what it's like to have millions watching your every move, waiting for you to fail. And I know what it's like to prove them wrong." He looked directly into the camera. "She's doing that every single time she steps onto that court. She's proving that a girl from the Philippines can compete with the best in the world. And that's not just special. That's historic." Chapter 4. The eruption. The words hung in the air like a prophecy. And then the world responded. Within minutes of Beckham's words leaving his mouth, social media was in complete chaos. Filipino fans, who had already mobilized 25,000 supporters to fill Wimbledon seats, erupted in a celebration unlike anything the tennis world had ever seen. Sir David Beckham just called Alex the real deal. "I'm crying." From the streets of Manila to center court at Wimbledon. What a journey. The whole world is watching now. But the reactions weren't limited to the Philippines. Tennis fans everywhere were captivated. Former players weighed in. Analysts dissected every syllable. Broadcasters replayed the clip again and again. One commentator said it perfectly. "When a global icon like David Beckham speaks, the world listens." And he just told the world that Alex Eala is special. That's not just a compliment. That's an endorsement. The hashtags erupted simultaneously. Hashtag LabanAlex. Hashtag Beckham. Hashtag The Real Deal. Trending across dozens of countries within the hour. And in the midst of all of it, the tennis establishment scrambled to process what had just happened. Former players who had been skeptical of the Eala effect suddenly found themselves reevaluating. Analysts who had once dismissed her grass court run as a fluke were now forced to reconsider every word they had written. The whispers that had followed her throughout her career, "She's just a flash in the pan. She can't sustain this level. She's too young, too inexperienced," were suddenly silenced. Because here was a man who had seen greatness up close. A man who had played alongside legends and competed against icons. A man who had carried the weight of a nation on his shoulders for 2 decades and emerged as one of the most respected figures in global athletics. And he had just said that Alex Eala reminded him of himself. Chapter 5. What Beckham actually saw, but step back for a moment. because there's something underneath all the celebration worth examining carefully. David Beckham didn't just praise a tennis player that afternoon. He recognized something specific and rare that most people watching the same match completely missed. He saw someone who understood the loneliness of the spotlight, the crushing weight of becoming a symbol for millions of people who need you to win for reasons that have nothing to do with sport. The particular kind of pressure that doesn't come from opponents or coaches or physical exhaustion, but from the eyes of an entire nation watching your every breath. He had lived inside that pressure for 20 years. He knew every corner of it. And when he watched Alex walk onto center court, unflinching, calm, jaw set, eyes locked, he wasn't watching a young player trying to manage a big moment. He was watching someone who had already made peace with the weight. Someone who had decided, somewhere along the way, that the pressure wasn't the enemy. That it was the point. That's not something you can teach, he had said. That's something you're born with. And perhaps that was the most powerful thing about his endorsement. Not that he praised her talent. Not that he celebrated her results. But that he looked at a 21-year-old from the Philippines and saw a kindred spirit, a fellow traveler on the difficult, lonely, magnificent road of carrying a nation's hopes on your shoulders every single time you step into a spotlight. Chapter 6. Her response, and Alex, for her part, remained remarkably composed through all of it. When asked about Beckham's comments in her post-match press conference, surrounded by cameras and reporters who were expecting some kind of emotional reaction to one of the most powerful endorsements of her young career, she didn't gush. She didn't bask in the attention. She didn't perform gratitude for the cameras. She simply nodded, smiled quietly, and said the words that had come to define everything about her journey. "It's an honor," she said, "but I'm not here for the praise. I'm here to represent my country. And I'm not done yet." The room fell quiet for a moment, and in that quiet, you could hear everything. The 25,000 fans still somewhere in the building. The group chats going off in Dubai and Birmingham and Manila. The 60 years of Grand Slam history that hadn't included a Filipino name in the seeded column. And one girl from Quezon City, calm, composed, already looking ahead, refusing to let the moment become bigger than the mission. Beckham had recognized something real in her, and her response proved he was right. She wasn't overwhelmed. She wasn't satisfied. She was hungry. She had a dream to chase, a nation to represent. And she wasn't done yet. Closing, bigger than tennis from the streets of Manila to center court at Wimbledon. From Venus Williams choosing her as a doubles partner to Rafael Nadal calling her the dark horse of the tournament. And now, Sir David Beckham, freshly knighted, standing in the royal box at the most prestigious tennis event in the world, telling a global television audience that a 21-year-old from the Philippines was the real deal. Her journey had always felt larger than sport, but now the entire world could see it too. Headlines across the globe splashed Beckham's words across their front pages. The story had transcended tennis entirely. It had become a cultural moment, the kind that gets remembered long after the scores are forgotten. The applause from the royal box had been heard around the world. But for Alex Eala, preparing now for what could become the biggest match of her career, a dream showdown on center court against Serena Williams, the real applause was still to come. She wasn't here for celebrity endorsements or viral moments or royal boxes. She was here to prove, one more time, on the biggest stage in sport, that a girl from Quezon City belonged among the very best in the world. And the entire world, from London to Manila to every Filipino nurse and engineer and seafarer watching on a phone somewhere across the globe, was watching to see her do exactly that. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to Tennis Unfiltered right now. The Beckham moment was incredible. But what's coming next on center court might be the biggest chapter yet. Turn on your notifications. You will not want to miss it.